This is Father Gregory Pine.
This is Father Joseph Anthony Kress.
And welcome to Godsplaining. Thanks to all those who support us. If you enjoy the show, please consider making a monthly donation on Patreon. Be sure to like and subscribe to Godsplaining wherever you listen to your podcasts.
If you don't like it, make a donation to the Benedictines at St. Louis Abbey.
This episode is going to be absolutely insupportable and unlistenable. So we're very delighted to be joined today, depending on what day you're listening this is Father Augustine Wetta. Thanks so much for joining us, Father Augustine.
Thank you. It's great to be there and here and wherever other people are, all at the same time.
Exactly. On this day, which is today.
Yeah.
Okay, so many. This is going to be the best 30 minutes of my life. So many of our listeners, or some of our listeners, I shouldn't puff you up too much. Some of our listeners might know you from your hijinks, which include talking about Jesus, writing books, one of which is called Humility Rules, another of which is called what is it? Think, Pray, Act. They also might
always pray first.
Oh, my bad. I'm embarrassed. That shows just how very precipitous I am. You don't often get to use the word precipitous.
Benedictine and Dominican. Dominican talks first and then prays.
Exactly. You got to figure out what you're going to say before you pray it. So they'll know you from things. But for those who don't know you, would you say a word of introduction in addition to the random facts that I have assembled?
Yes. Hello. My name is Father Augustine. I am the best-selling author of Humility Rules. No doubt. I am 80,000 copies, actually, as of last week. So take that, Amazon. I was once nearly eaten by a shark. If you look it up online, you can find the news clip. And I live in St. Louis, Missouri, and I am a monk. Nice. Oh, and I was once the second funniest man in Houston, Texas.
Okay, like in the whole city, or at one bar in the city?
Well, it was probably just the bar, but they claim to represent the whole city.
Okay, we'll take it.
Yeah.
Okay.
It doesn't stop me from screaming.
Yeah, nothing does. So the question is, can you lead with a joke? Can you tell us a joke which may or may not make us laugh?
Okay, well, actually, I'm going to tell you, I've been thinking about this because you decided to have this episode on humor, right? And St. Benedict says that a monk shouldn't laugh, right? Uh-huh. That, in fact, it's one of the steps of humility. And that really bothered me for a long time. I actually went to one of our old monks and asked him about it, and he said it's basically the difference between ha 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 and ha ha ha, right? So I've got three jokes to illustrate this difference, okay? The first joke is, what do you call a cow with three legs?
I don't know.
Lean beef. Yeah. What do you call a cow with no legs?
Ground beef?
Ground beef.
That's right. What do you call a cow with two legs? Your mom. Right? Okay, so so the first two jokes are like pleasant and uplifting and funny, but the last joke is cruel, right? And totally inappropriate. And that's the sort of joke that St. Benedict. But the problem is that the best jokes are the cruelest jokes, right? So it's hard to know when you're going to cross that line. I mean, I work with teenagers, and you know from firsthand experience that they have trouble discerning the difference between appropriate jokes and inappropriate jokes. And I'm still working on that. Actually, I had to prostrate myself fully in the faculty room just the other day for a joke that I still don't think is offensive, by the way, but. But St. Benedict says you apologize first and maybe think about it later.
Okay.
Maybe think about it.
St. Dominic says you speak first and then maybe pray about it later.
As we discussed earlier. That's the rule, right?
Uh-huh.
That's good. That's good.
Okay. Okay, so you're thinking about joke telling. You're thinking about being lighthearted and being serious at the appropriate times and in the appropriate places. And you're also a man who writes rules for life type books. You're not Jordan Peterson, but you are the best-selling author of Humility Rules. So have you
I'm
come
a
up
lot
with some
humbler than
rules?
Jordan Peterson. Sorry.
Nice, nailed it. Okay,
Yeah, I mean, I'm officially humbler.
right. We covered that. So do you have rules for like joke telling or for humor? Insofar as they kind of keep you on the rails or keep you from going off the rails? Things from your experience, things from your wisdom.
Rules. Well, I do have 3 rules that I tell the kids at the beginning of every year. You never joke about race, you never joke about someone's sexuality, and you never joke about their religion. Although the third is kind of, I mean, among grown-ups, well, nah, I don't think there's any exceptions to that. Although I have this Muslim friend and we joke all the time about this stuff, so.
Uh-huh.
He calls
Wait.
this piece of armor behind me, he calls it my interreligious dialogue outfit.
Oh my gosh.
So I guess
I get
that's
it.
it
Unbelievable.
about religion. But yeah, but I do think I do think you don't joke about someone's race ever. I mean, it's just never funny. And then although actually I heard a pretty good funny. That said, I have this friend who is full-blooded Apache Indian. You should have him on the show. He is really funny. And he told me this hilarious story about how when he was in 7th grade, his teacher found out he was Native American. This is California, where everyone is so open-minded, right? And she asked his father to come in and speak about Native American religions. The thing is, the Apache have been Catholic since like the 1700s. So he had to go out and buy a couple of pelts and some horns. And he danced around the classroom singing. And then he handed out little pamphlets on Catholic truth. And she made him stop. Wow. It was fun. It was fun until it turned Catholic. And then that was the end of that. Yeah.
Well, I feel like that's the vast majority of life, is that when Catholicism enters the ring, everybody just gets serious, and it's like, okay, now we've lost all joy in life. I mean,
that's right.
Doing campus ministry, that is like the constant tension, is like we go out and evangelize, invite people to encounter the Lord in sacraments and scripture, and the thing that they're always like, but do I have to quit having fun? So I guess like, where does that line is like? Is piety, is faithful, is Catholicism just lockdown seriousness, or is it some kind of fun?
Well, I like to think that it's the latter. It's liturgy is sort of at its core is prayer, is play, right? I mean, you're dressing up and you're parading around and you're imitating people and singing songs and things. And it's lit at its heart. We're a very sort of playful religion, I think. And I frankly can't imagine anyone really surviving the religious life without a sense of humor. But I do tell the kids that it is my job to make sure they don't enjoy themselves. It's a serious stuff. Anyway, that's what the old men in Rome are supposed to be looking down their noses at all of our fun, right?
Yeah.
But ironically, it's these. I teach sexual ethics to high school juniors, if you can imagine. The kids call it sex and Nazis because every discussion, even my apologetics class is called that off the records, because every discussion ends with one or the other topic, regardless of what we could be talking about, the Eucharist or whatever, but that's all they really want to talk about. And I say to inevitably there are 2 or 3 kids in the class who just have decided that the Catholic Church is wrong on these subjects. And I say to them, well, like every world religion, every culture for the last 4,000 years has said that it's has had basically pretty similar rules about marriage, but you 3 figured it out, right? And the point. And we don't make up these. Your parents and I don't make up these rules to make you miserable. We make them so that you can have fun, so you can relax and enjoy yourself. I mean, it's as soon as you start to break the rules, you actually end up having less fun. I think.
All right, so follow-up question. In all the nerds
Yes.
down in Nerdville, all right, we're all thinking about, I identify with them, by the way, are thinking about eutropalia.
Not me. I don't. I actually
Yeah.
feel very affinity with the bullies. I feel like
Okay.
bullies these days.
Okay.
Yeah, well, I mean, because
They
everybody's
need to be redeemed. Like,
well,
they get
everybody's
such a
all
bad rap.
anti-bully these days, right? They're all sort of. I'm afraid that the bullies are going to get a poor self-image because we keep hammering them for I don't know.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Thank
hey,
you
the
for
bullies serve a purpose. They certainly served a big purpose in my life. I mean, if it weren't for bullies, I'd have a straighter nose for one thing, but I wouldn't be half the man I am today if they hadn't relentlessly erased the most glaring eccentricities of my personality.
That is exactly what all of our listeners are thinking right now. Good thing your glaring eccentricities have been erased. Heaven forfend that they come through.
I mean, who should we send the thank you cards to? That's my question.
Exactly.
Like,
old Biff
send the
and Robbie
flowers
down
and
the
the thank
corner.
you.
Kenny
There's
Hertz was my bully.
Oh, gosh.
His last name was Hertz.
I'm saying his name. Yeah, and isn't that ironic? His last name was Hertz.
Yeah.
Was it like
he's either destined to be a bully or like an NFL quarterback?
HERTZ?
Ironically, at our last college, sorry, what was that, Father?
Just keep
I was
going.
saying, yeah, you're good.
Okay, ironically, at our class reunion, he and I ended up going to college together as well. He and I stood around and talked. And he kept saying, "Man, I was such an idiot in high school. Man, I was such a," and I knew what he was saying. So I was like, "Look, I'm an idiot now." So we're pretty well even. So people, I mean, I think he turned out to be okay. I think in the end, as many bullies do. Although I just recently read a study of bullies that showed that they actually have really high self-esteem and they go on to be pretty successful. Yeah, I was always told that they were insecure and were going to grow up and be losers, but that's not true. Bullies
That's just
do
the Hollywood
well
depiction.
Bullies do well in life.
If you leave this podcast with nothing else, remember to respect your bully because he could be your boss someday.
Okay. So I was asking a question like 3.5 minutes ago before Bully Detour. I suppose I invited said Detour insofar as I identified as a citizen of Nerdville, but regardless.
Yeah.
So we talk about some number of people, it's probably not large, talk about eutropalia as a kind of virtuous exercise. So it's like an entry into this contemplative disposition. You described it as play. And sometimes we hear, let's see, the Apostle John cited, and the story is recounted.
Eutropalia. I thought you weren't supposed to do that. I thought.
Oh my gosh, you're unbelievable.
What is eutropalia?
You're like a feral cat. It's like a cat who was once domesticated to scorn its owners, and then was let loose and like scorns them even more from a greater distance.
I have a theory about cats, actually. That we worshipped them for thousands of years, right? And then we stopped, and they just haven't forgotten.
Yeah,
anyways,
that's a good theory.
I prefer to be a feral dog, actually, if you don't mind.
Sure, have it your way. This is Burger King in any number of ways. So eutropalia. And you have the story recounted about the Apostle John. There's no way that I'm going to finish this question. It's just not going to happen. This is going to be the entire episode.
I don't know what eutropalia is. It sounds like a urinary tract infection.
Oh my gosh, this is unbelievable.
What is eutropalia?
Eutropalia is like play. Okay, so the story that's told about the Apostle John in Cashin's conferences is that people are like, "Hey man, why aren't you always praying?" And he's like, "You have to unstring the bow, or else it's going to get weak, right? Or the bow is going to crack." I don't remember the exact words that are used, but he seems to describe play as a kind of necessary thing. But what's not clear is whether it's necessary because like you have to concede to the weakness of human flesh, or if it's because it's like an essential feature of human joy, delight. So what do you think? Do you think there'll be joking in heaven, or do you think that it's just a passing fancy so that we can get through this vale of tears?
Well, I just wrote and then purposely did not publish an article on Dante's Inferno. And the smile, well, he talks about there's smiles all through Dante's Inferno. There are 3 smiles in hell, I think 7 smiles in purgatory, and 20 something smiles in heaven. And I don't know whether that counts as eutrapelia, but it certainly indicates joy. And it's hard to tell jokes and have fun and not smile. It's also hard to not smile back, because smiles are sort of the physical conduit of joy between people. And so the end conclusion is basically that we made the world hell for the last 3 years. Not that I was against the masks, but I'm not an anti-masker. I'm in favor of obedience. So I blame my superiors. But someone, ever since I became a big shot celebrity priest, people have been asking, priest. Can't you tell a best-selling celebrity shark attack priest? A bunch of my followers, I'm down to Twitter alone. I just couldn't take it anymore. But asked me to say something about the whole mass situation. I was like, look, I'm not a doctor and I'm not a bishop, and you're lucky I'm neither. I'm lucky I'm neither. And so I'm just, if the bishops say it's to do it and doctors agree, then I'm going with it. But the result is that we've had like no interpersonal joy for 2 years. I think that to get real serious all of a sudden, I think the kids have really suffered from that.
The kids are all right, though. The kids are all right.
No, they're not. That's the problem. They're not all right. They're addicted to their phones and to their. Well, I told a kid to put away his phone in class the other day, and he said, "But I'm talking to my parents." Like, again, what happened to all the bullies, for crying out loud? But the fact that did not earn him scorn at a boys' school just tells you how warped they've become from living at home all the time. And anyway, what other questions you got?
All right, we're talking about joy. We're talking about eutrapelia, humor, and all these things. There can be this time where like you are in bad situation, or not bad situations, but like you find humor in a situation that shouldn't be humorous, right? You find there's something happening, whether it's you're at mass and you should not be laughing at something. It's not necessarily a comedy club in that circumstance, but for those like that are, is humor something that you can just kind of turn on and off? Is it now's the time to kind of let your hair down and relax and be humorous, and now's the time to kind of tighten up? How does this become kind of like a virtuous disposition of enjoyment, relaxation, and all of that, no matter the situation?
Interesting. I never quite thought of it that way, because we've all been in situations where it was just totally inappropriate to laugh,
right?
And yet we couldn't stop, right?
Which makes it actually all the funnier, oddly enough.
Yeah, which just makes it even better. In the monastery, the old guys call it the novice disease, because you get it like usually at Vespers, during Latin Vespers, during like a really solemn moment, somebody will get the giggles and it kind of spreads. We had a beagle creep
as
into the church. No. Yeah. Well, we are getting a little desperate, but not that desperate, not yet.
Wait, you're the vocations director, aren't you?
Yeah. Well, I told the abbot I would double the size of the monastery within the next year, and I've only got one novice, so I'm getting real desperate. Yeah, so anybody out there who has nothing else to do and nothing better to do with your life, join St. Louis Abbey. But it was summer and the doors were open and somebody was walking their beagle, and the beagle came into the church and started running around, started doing laps around the altar. And the sacristan got up and started chasing the dog, and then the MC got up and started chasing the dog. And there, it's this whole it was this whole kind of a who was like a what's his name? The
Benny Hill.
Benny Hill.
Groucho
It's
Marx.
Benny Hill. I wanted to say Benny Hahn, but that's not true. Benny Hill.
Benny Hanna. Have you
Benny
been to a Benny
Hanna?
Hanna
No,
festival?
he wouldn't enjoy that. And then our old grumpy brother Martin decided he was going to hit the dog with his cane, and because the dog took a real liking to him for some strange reason, and sat right in front of him, looking straight at him, and he reached real slowly for his cane and brought up and just as he came forward, he hit his head on the stall in front of him, and then we all kind of lost it. And the abbot had to stop the prayers altogether. But yeah, that's the sort of, you're right, there would be some sort of virtue in being able to control your laughter, which I have not mastered entirely. But you're right, it is. I hadn't thought of, say, humor as a virtue, as a sort of a skill, like, I don't know, juggling or soccer, but it could be a virtue if it's really spreading joy. Then it would be a virtue, wouldn't it? Kind of. All right, but are we limited? You're Dominicans. Are we limited the number of virtues, or can we make up new ones?
I mean, they either exist or they don't exist, but it's a matter of doing the hard work of identifying them. I think that's what we're doing here. And in trying to identify the virtue of humor, I think part of it is, as we're working through our lives, sometimes we do stupid things and then we regret them. So we have hindsight, but we don't so much have foresight. And sometimes part of becoming virtuous is translating hindsight into subsequent foresight. So, like, for instance, when you do, when you tell jokes, which may or may not be offensive, or when you perform funny gestures, which may or may not be offensive. Like, for instance, we were at Seek, and the way I was alerted to your physical presence in the building was that you came up behind me and gave me a double wet willy.
While you were giving a radio interview, which I thought was particularly clever on my account, because you couldn't react. Because what were you going to say?
Yeah, what was I going to say?
I don't know.
Taken the opportunity to schedule you for a Guestsplaining episode, so that way I can make my thoughts known. But
later I regretted it, though. I really did regret it, because the look of horror on your face was so genuine that I'm pretty sure I wrote you an apology. I was like, hey, look, I'm really sorry. That was just totally out of line.
You did. You wrote me a small email apology. But then again, our Lord kind of gave wet willies of a certain sort. Although it says that he touched the man's ears and then he spat. So it seems like more of a reverse wet willy. Regardless,
that's right. I was just trying to imitate our Lord.
Yeah, that's what I love about you.
Is the Lord the originator of the wet willy?
It seems he may have been.
Yeah. Except he did it backwards. Right. It was the
reverse. It was deconstructed. It was a deconstructed wet willy.
The dry willy, but to be
right. And it took the subsequent development of doctrine for us to arrive at the wet willy. But have you found ways of translating hindsight into foresight, of being a calmer, collected-er version of your humorous self? Or do you think that you're basically just destined to perform said whatever? What was that thing you said? Where you like prostrate yourself before an individual until such time as he pardons you? Does that have a name in the Benedictine tradition?
Well, does it? No, I just call it an apology.
Okay.
But it's not an apology, is it? I mean, you don't. And I run around the country giving talks to kids about this, and I think one of the best things about the Benedictine apology is that it's not an apology. You don't have to be sorry. You don't have to look sorry. You don't have to feel sorry. You don't even have to say you're sorry. You just throw yourself on the ground and beg for a blessing. Yeah. And in my experience, it's the fastest way to win an argument.
Right.
Also,
his life is about winning arguments.
Nosedive onto the floor. All right.
Yeah.
Maybe we are motivated by the same things.
It's a sort of reverse bullying. I read somewhere that when you're confronted with someone who is physically helpless, your brain releases oxytocin, and so you can't help but like want to reach out, right?
I've also heard that called the cuddle hormone. So maybe it's an inducement for the other person to like perform the merciful equivalent of cuddling from a distance, a safe and healthy distance.
Yeah.
Okay, but I'm still wondering about hindsight and foresight. Have you found ways of translating your hindsight, which is to say, maybe not, maybe I regret that, maybe that was a bit too much, to foresight? So the next time you're approaching a Dominican who's giving a radio interview, you think to yourself, I'm going to get him. And then you say, maybe in a way that's more subtle and involves less of my saliva in his ear canals. Your thoughts?
Yes. I have a really good friend who's a psychologist, and we hang out all the time. He really ought to be charging me, but his thing is like, there comes a time when you have to go from being the jester to being the sage, and I've been working on that, actually, believe it or not. I apologize less than I have to apologize less than I used to. Because you're right. It's or the kids asked me which was more fun, being a lifeguard or being a beach lifeguard or being a monk. And if I'm going to be totally honest, it was more fun being a beach lifeguard, right? but in my defense, there's nothing more depressing than a 40-year-old lifeguard. Mm-hmm. So you got to grow up. If you're there is a point where you have to decide. You really have to. You're forced to make a choice between joy on the one hand and fun on the other. And humor is always fun, but sometimes you just you don't want to be always the clown, right? And you've touched on something really personal and very sad in my life. Thank you very much for that. That I've always had trouble. No, I'm just kidding. But not really though, because I do have a tendency to be the clown and to opt for that instead of saying something serious, which I think is what Benedict is really afraid of. Is that you're going to end up joking around your whole life and never quite get to the serious stuff, because the serious stuff is what brings joy, sacrifice and suffering and that sort of stuff. That's the really deep joy. But then I've never known a holy person who didn't have a great sense of humor.
I love to watch stand-up comics. I'm a big fan of stand-up comedy. And I saw an interview once with a comic, and they were saying the beauty of stand-up comedy is that they can give social commentary. They can speak truths through the means of humor and jokes, which nobody else can, right? And if you want to kind of get a sense of the certain kind of social environment, like of a certain decade, if you like go back to the 80s, if you want to see what's happening there, like you would watch Richard Pryor or something like that. And that the comics give a more accurate representation to the social realities of the time because they can convey it through humor. So from your experience being a jovial human being, do you find that you're able to communicate truth better because humor is more palatable to a broader group of people than just like hitting super serious facts all the time at people? Like, can you convey truth easier via humor in your experience?
My brain went somewhere else in the middle of what you're
Follow
saying.
Your brain. Follow your brain.
But I'll be back to that in a second, because yes, I think there are two things. I was thinking about The Body and Society. What's the book by it's about early monasticism, and it was written by same guy who wrote a famous biography of St. Augustine. I can't remember his name, but the book is called The Body and Society. And in it, he talks about how monks became these intercessors between peasantry and royalty, because they were outside of the system. And I wonder if comedians don't kind of serve that role now, that they can only the monk, like if somebody felt that their duke was being excessive in his demands for payment or something, they would go tell the monks, and then the monks would show up and say, you've been bad, you need to be nicer to your subjects and stuff, because they were outside of the system. And I wonder if humor doesn't serve that that function as well. And if maybe the comedian has kind of taken the place of the monk as a truth teller, a truth speaker. That said, my advice, our old Father Timothy gave me the advice when I was ordained. He said, when you preach, you want to tickle them with one hand and slap them with the other. Now that I think of it,
metaphorically, just metaphorically, okay.
When you say it out loud, but it in fact,
well, when you added gestures to it, that's where it got.
Yeah, yeah, that was kind of icky, wasn't it? But his point was, but I think it does work that way. Because humor. Well, I think the best sort of humor is self-deprecating humor, and reveal. Showing a part of yourself that you're not particularly proud of, or being willing to share your weakness with people, opens them up in such a way that then you can hit them with something that's a little more serious. I think that was the point he was trying to make. I hope that was the point he was trying to make. Otherwise, ew.
All right. Well, we've come nearly to the end of our time.
No.
But I know, right? We'll just have to record a 7-hour episode next time. That'll make up for it.
Yeah.
Do you have a final humorous thought? Not necessarily a joke, but a final thought for our listeners, whether it be an encouragement or a commendation, or maybe just a joke. It's your call.
None of the above. I have a story from the Desert Fathers that is. I'm writing a book now on the Desert Fathers, or I actually just wrote a book on the Desert Fathers, but I'm writing another one. Because I've found all these obscure stories that no one's ever heard of. And one of them is that this philosopher from Athens, he goes out into the desert and apprentices himself to a monk because he's heard that the monks are very wise. And every day the monk wakes up, insults him, and demands payment, and then dismisses him. And he does this for 3 years. And eventually, at the end of the 3 years, he just tells the philosopher to get lost. And this young Athenian philosopher trudges back home thinking he's wasted his time. And on his way through the gates of Athens, there's this bum sitting on the side of the road yelling at people as they walk by. So he insults the philosopher, and the philosopher looks at him and laughs. And the bum stands up. He says, "Why do you laugh at me when I insult you?" And he says, "Well, because I've been paying for that for 3 years, and you just gave it to me for free." And the old bum bows low and says, "The city is yours." I mean, I think if we can learn to laugh at ourselves, and even to laugh at insults and the world around us, that the world will smile back, and that the city will be yours, will be ours. How's that?
It's beautiful. I dig it. I have recently been insulted on a variety of occasions for totally random reasons, like in the streets of the place where I live.
Oh, I was thinking just before this episode when we were talking.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. There's that too. That's more of a piece. I wouldn't know how to recognize our relationship if it weren't marked by such events. But yeah. Okay. Well, as a final thing, so you've written books and you contribute to podcasts and you sometimes speak. Is there a place where people can get information about these things and more?
Yeah, if you do a Google search for Surfing Monk, I'm the first thing that comes up, and it'll pretty much direct you to a YouTube video, and then my website, my author website, which you have ridiculed on a number of occasions. It's like it's like jAugustineWetta.org or .com or something. But anyway, Augustine Wetta. If you look up, there just aren't that many Wettas in the world, so. Just do a Google search for Wetta. You can pretty much find me.
There you go. So jAugustineWetta.net.org.com. You should look them up at that supremely convenient handle.
Yeah.
And then, okay, perfect. All right. Well, thanks very much. Thanks for taking the time. I don't know how to comport myself as if I were being serious right now, because there's been nothing serious really, except for the things that were serious. So I'll just seamlessly transition into our send-off, which is to say, thanks as always for listening to Godsplaining. Please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. like the episode, if you would, subscribe on YouTube or your podcast app, and leave a 5-star review. And when doing so, note especially the fact that it was because of Father Augustine that you left a 5-star review, so then he can go into all of our social media feeds, find those comments, and attribute all of our success to himself. What were you going to say?
And then leave 4 or 5 reviews on Amazon for my books under other people's names.
Perfect. Yep, great. Okay. If you'd like to donate to the show through Patreon, you can follow the link in the description or the show notes. And then there you will also find links for upcoming events and merchandise. Speaking of upcoming events, we just released information on our retreats for this summer and fall. So the All-Comers Retreat, which is for people age 21 and beyond, is going to take place on June 16th through 18th at Malvern Retreat House, just outside of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. It's going to be about the 4 cardinal virtues, and the 5 hosts of Godsplaining will be there. And Father Augustine is not invited. He'll be having an alternate retreat just 2 blocks down, which will be much funnier and much more holy.
You said there's Godsplaining merch?
There is Godsplaining merch. Yep.
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
Can I
just
get
like
a
shirts with
Dominican
your
habit?
face.
Oh.
Yes. Yeah. Dominican habit and a tattoo of me.
Ooh.
So thank
Can I get
you
a
to all
tattoo
of you.
Over my face.
I'll never finish this. I'll never finish this episode. All right. So thanks so much for listening. Know of our prayers for you. Please pray for us, and we'll catch you next time on Godsplaining.